Who was the first person to pick up a stick, a stone or a bone and carry it around to use as a weapon? Was this the first real possession? What tools did our pre-human ancestors use? And what new tools were invented by early humans? Was the Stone Age preceded by a long-lost Wood Age? What are the earliest stone crafting technologies, and how did the art evolve over time? And what's so special about the way humans use tools? How did cumulative technological progress get started? In this video, we're going to be talking about tools and technology, looking at some of humanity's earliest inventions and physical creations. We're going to cover technological progress during the pre-Stone Age and the early Stone Age. Then in the next video, we'll focus in on humanity's mastery of fire and water. And then in later videos, we will come to look at later Stone Age technologies further along in the Ascent of Humanity series. Our last common ancestor with chimps would have made and used basic tools, probably similar to the ones chimps use today. Chimps use hammer and anvil setups to crack nuts, mini skewers to pluck tasty grubs out of trunks, and little twiggy hooks to fish for termites. They craft their wooden tools purposefully, selecting a suitable stick, removing leaves, and kinking it into shape as required. In the wild, chimps don't craft stone, although some captive chimps have been taught to do so by humans. These chimp tools aren't totally terrible, but they're not nearly as good as the tools made by early hominins. It seems that chimps just don't have the right gripping abilities or thumb setup to enable them to craft stone well. And our last common ancestor with chimps wouldn't have had the right anatomical setup either. Chimps make nests to sleep in every night, never sleeping in the same nest twice. This involves scrunching up branches and leaves and weaving them together into a semi-cocoon with a comfortable mattress. They use the softest leaves to cushion their pillow. Our last common ancestor with chimps may have behaved similarly, and probably took their nest building skills out onto the savannas, perhaps finding trees to sleep in during the nights. There's a blurred line between what might be considered a sophisticated ape's nest and a very basic human treehouse or hut. But at some point this line must have been crossed, and somehow these leafy windbreaks and umbrellas, sunshades come together to become walls and a roof with a bed on the floor. We'll surely never know how this might have happened, because organic material is perishable and therefore not really preserved long term in the archaeological record. Yet nest building must surely have been very important to our technological journey, because it was probably the most complex type of production or making undertaken by our pre-human ancestors, involving tying together multiple different parts to create the whole. The fact that wooden tools aren't preserved means we're missing a lot of what must have gone on back in the pre-Stone Age. Maybe there was a technological Wood Age. It seems probable, but we just don't know. One can certainly imagine it might have been handy to carry around a stick as a weapon. We weren't big hunters back then, but a pointy or clubby stick could be useful for self-defense. I mean, it's probably not going to enable a hominin to fight off a lion, but it is better than nothing. And it could certainly be useful for fending off wild dogs or baboons or snakes or other humans, especially if your whole group is armed with sharp sticks. And a stick can be thrown as a missile weapon or banged to make intimidating sounds, possibly as part of the lion dance that we discussed in the last video. Perhaps we systematically began to arm ourselves soon after we became fully bipedal and had our hands free. By the way, if you have your hands free, do use them to click a like on this video or subscribe to this exciting new YouTube channel, and positive words or messages are always much appreciated. Anyways, arming oneself with weapons feels natural to me. It feels instinctive. But maybe early hominins hadn't yet evolved the instinct to arm themselves. Using weapons that aren't part of your own body is rare in the animal kingdom. Although this may just be because so few animals have arms and hands. Apart from primates, no non-insect land animals have the biological equipment necessary to hold weapons. And non-human primates use their forelimbs for locomotion, so cannot carry weapons around. Chimps will sometimes pick up sticks and stones to throw during fights and confrontations, but these are just grabbed in the heat of the moment generally. At least one group of chimps has innovated the use of spears, sharpening the tips of sticks with their teeth before using them to hunt bush babies. Interestingly, these particular chimps live on the savannas, as our ancestors did. Crabs are one of the few animals with arms, and some of them do use weapons. Boxer crabs carry around poisonous anemones in their pincers, which enable them to punch well above their weight. And some octopuses deliberately acquire and wield venomous jellyfish tentacles, weapons that they use both to hunt and to defend themselves from predators. So perhaps it's normal for any animal with spare limbs to use weapons, which would suggest that we could have enculturated that behaviour very soon after we became bipedal. One interesting, although speculative idea is that cobras might have actually evolved their ability to spit venom as part of a missile weapons arms race with hominins. And if that is true, that would mean that our armaments are very old indeed. African cobras evolved to spit around the same time our ancestors headed out to meet them on the plains, roughly 7 million years ago. And later, Asian cobras independently evolved the same adaptation when hominins eventually moved into their environment. Anyways, we'll never know when it happened or why, but at some point, one of our ancestors decided to start carrying around a stick, bone or stone with the express intent of using it as a weapon. A truly momentous event in the history of the world. When it comes to stone tools, we used to think that the first homos, Homo habilis, invented the first crafted stone tools, the Oldowan tools. And we also thought that then Homo erectus evolved and they started making more sophisticated Acheulean tools. However, new discoveries have disrupted the neatness of that theory. The oldest tools currently on record are the Lombekwi tools, found in Kenya, that have been dated to 3.3 million years ago, which is long before the first evidence of the Homo genus. This would have been at a time when various species of Australopiths roamed Africa. Then came the Oldowan tools, first found in Ethiopia. The earliest artefacts in this style may date back beyond 2.6 million years ago, perhaps as early as 2.9 million years ago, therefore also possibly predating Homo habilis, who had originally been given the credit. Next came the Acheulean tools, first discovered in France but subsequently found all over the world. Until recently, the earliest dated to 1.7 million years ago, suggesting they were one of Homo erectus's innovations. But now tools that are arguably Acheulean in style have been found in Asia and dated to over 2 million years ago, which would put them, at least supposedly, pre-erectus. Anyways, it's likely that this trend of earlier and earlier finds will continue, with the dates we have pushing back further and further into the past continuously. Anyways, the earliest tools, the Lombequi tools, are pretty basic. We can tell they've been deliberately crafted, but can't work out what most of them were actually used for. Some are likely hammer and anvils, similar to the ones chimps use to break nuts, except these ones have been deliberately crafted into the ideal shape. Some of the tools may have been designed to process plant foods, grinding up hard to digest sustenance. The Lombequi tools were pretty simple to make, just a few well-placed breaks to shape the stone a bit. Older Wan tools represent a step up in sophistication. We can often tell what they were designed to do for a start, and we have evidence of them actually being used. We see hammers, chisels, scrapers, choppers, and awls. A whole Stone Age toolkit. Many of these tools were used to butcher and process meat, archaeologically recording our ancestors' move towards more carnivorous diets. We don't find any hunting weapons or tools though, which isn't surprising because it's believed that at this stage hominins were scavengers rather than proper hunters. Some of the tools, the choppers, were used to cut wood, hinting at a long-lost woodworking industry. The presence of awls is significant, as these are used for puncturing materials during stitching, implying these ancestors were working canvas-type materials or animal hides, perhaps for shelter, bedding or clothing. Older Wan tools are harder to make than the Lombequi tools, often requiring upwards of 60 precision strikes or naps, with different types of nap or strike required for different parts of the process. The Acheulean tools were even more complex. Various different types have been found, including meat cleavers and carvers, but by far the most popular is the hand axe. These hand axes were single almond-shaped stones. They were not attached to wooden handles. They were cut bifacially on both sides of the stone and had sharp edges going right the way round. These edges were cut to different angles, some sharper and some duller, meaning that a single hand axe could be used for multiple different tasks. This is why they're sometimes referred to as the Stone Age Swiss Army knife. Some have suggested that hand axes may also have been used for hunting. One speculative theory is that they could have been hurled like a discus, although many think this is unlikely. We'll come back to the subject of hunting in an upcoming video. Making a hand axe required many hours of concentrated stone knapping by a skilled and practiced hand, and some parts of the production process were amazingly subtle and complex. For example, after the shape of the axe was cut and the edges had been sharpened with a stow, these edges were then deliberately dulled again before being resharpened, this time using a bone. Doing this made the finished blades more effective and robust. The complexity and the counterintuitive nature of this process really does prove quite how skilled and knowledgeable these craftspeople must have been. We've found a lot of Acheulean hand axes, including huge caches of tools that appear mostly unused, with many impractically large and dysfunctional. This does seem to suggest that perhaps hand axes were coming to acquire some kind of symbolic purpose, perhaps being used as a demonstration of status, or even as a currency. Whether or not Homo erectus originally invented Acheulean tools, they certainly used and innovated the technology a lot. Homo erectus evolved around 1.9 million years ago and eventually spread out all over the old world, conquering Africa, Europe, and much of Asia. They were more human-like than anything that had come before. and there is much debate about how intelligent they were and how sophisticated their societies would have been. Homo erectus was highly successful and used technology to move rapidly up the food chain, ultimately becoming apex predators, masters over the lands. Although, to the best of my knowledge, we haven't any clear-cut examples of stone weapons from the early erectus period. I mean, hand axes could clearly be used to bash other humans over the head, but as mentioned, most experts do not think they were used for hunting. They had multiple functions, but they were certainly more tool than weapon, which implies the main weapons used by early erectus may have been nothing more than sharp sticks, which doesn't sound very impressive from a modern perspective. But if it's a really big, long stick made from really solid wood and carefully sharpened like a stake, then this actually is quite a formidable weapon, potentially able to deliver a lethal force to very specific target areas. I mean, it doesn't really matter how big an animal is. If it gets a wooden stake spear driven through its eye socket, it is probably going to die. Anyways, as we've already alluded, there must have been plenty of technologies from the early Stone Age that we'll never know about, because most things people had would have been made from perishable material. Homo erectus's ability to colonize climates much colder than the one they evolved in suggests they may have had some kind of clothing, perhaps animal skin cloaks and blankets. And we know that Homo erectus got into the habit of moving stones around to enable industry in areas that didn't have the required natural resources. Did they perhaps invent bags to carry things around in? We don't know, but it certainly seems possible. Many animals eat plants with medicinal properties when they're feeling ill, and this behaviour was likely present in our pre-human ancestors. One would expect the ingenious Homo erectus to have built on the medicinal knowledge they inherited, but this would of course be hard to see within the fossil record. Tools and weapons are not unique to humans, but it is clear that we use them in an exceptional way compared to other animals. Where other species have a few types of simple tool, we have millions of types of tool, some of them staggeringly complex and sophisticated. As discussed in the Evolution of Empathy video, our newfound ability to share intentions and get inside the heads of others enabled us to teach and pass on information in a new way. This meant that highly complex tool-making procedures could be remembered over the generations and gradually innovated and improved upon over long periods of time. And so the process of cumulative technological progress kicked off, a juggernaut that moved very slowly at first, but has been continuously picking up speed and momentum ever since. If used well, technology can amplify natural human capabilities many times over, and this was already true 2 million years ago. From a predator's point of view, unarmed hominins were weak and incapable of landing damaging attacks, whereas an organised group of hominins advancing behind sharpened stake spears could be lethal. And many things are simply not possible without technology. To take a very basic example, it wouldn't have been possible to colonize cold environments without some form of clothing. Toolmaking and technology are important aspects of culture, deeply impacting lifestyle and behaviour. Toolmaking clearly played a key role in the development of art and expression and symbolism, all of which we'll discuss in future videos. One interesting thing to think about is that tools and weapons ultimately became our first possessions, things we owned and carried about with us. They became part of us, part of our identity. Technology became so important to us that we biologically evolved to become better at tool making, evolving extreme dexterity, complex manipulation and precision gripping abilities far in advance of any other animal. Much of this was facilitated by the development of our ulnar thumbs that can be pinched against any and all of the fingers. So now let's go to place the advances we've discussed today on the timeline we've been building up over the last few videos. Hominins would have been using wooden tools right from the start, but we don't know whether their technological abilities were much different from those of our pre-human ancestors. So don't really know if we have anything specific to put on the timeline pre-Stone Age, except in the case of weapons perhaps. We don't have any evidence, but logically I think it's most likely that we armed ourselves as soon as we had our arms free. And so we'll put this on the timeline right after bipedalism, perhaps happening around 5 to 7 million years ago. As for stonecrafting, the Lombequi tools are about 3.3 million years old. The Oldowan culture may have been 2.9 million years old, and the Acheulean tool culture may have been 2+ million years old. So stonecrafting goes in at 3.3 million years ago, which we're guesstimating is after the evolution of expansive love, before the development of shared intentionality or super empathy. And maybe it makes sense to slot in the beginnings of cumulative technological progress around this time as well, although it perhaps properly got going after the development of shared intentionality. Anyways, in the next video we will continue the technological theme, looking at the development of fire control and seafaring, our mastery of fire and water. I'd be interested to hear what you think about some of the interesting topics we've been discussing today. Do you believe there was a long-lost wood age? And what about these early stonecrafters? Do you think these artifacts they were making would count as symbolic representations, or even as real art? And when do you think we first started carrying around weapons? How would you feel going up against a lion or a leopard with a sharp stick? Anyways, leave some comments down in the comments section, and obviously, like the video, that's very helpful. Subscribe to this new YouTube channel, and any suggestions are very useful because I've only just started doing this, so gradually improving as I go along, hopefully. But anyway, thanks a lot for watching. I hope you're interested, and see you on the next video. Peace and love.